Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Tracer Franchising Podcast, where we dive deep into franchises, franchisees, as well as some outside vendors. We use real data and we speak to real operators so you can make smarter business decisions. I'm Josh Emerson, franchise broker and founder of Tracer Franchising. We help serious buyers, especially veterans and experienced professionals, find the right franchise to own, grow, and eventually sell. Basically, if you love data and you're willing to do the work to find the right franchise for you, we're a great fit. We'll guide you through the research process, provide tools to compare options, and offer candid insights so you don't get stuck in a bad deal. If you're exploring franchise ownership and want to work with someone who takes due diligence seriously, head to tracerfranchising.com to learn more. Scroll down and you can schedule 30 minutes with me. Also, feel free to email me, josh@tracerfranchising.com. Today's episode is a deep dive into Amco transmissions and total car care, one of the most iconic names in the auto repair world. I'm joined by Tom Shoolbraid, their director of franchise development, who's been with Amco on and off since about 1987. We talk about the business model, customer flow, franchisee support, margins, the evolution of car care, and what it takes to succeed as an Amco owner. It's a great episode if you're looking for a non-sexy but very stable multi-unit franchise opportunity that flies under the radar for most first-time franchise buyers. Before we get into it, I'm going to give you a couple more insights here. So these guys, they've been around for a really long time. The first unit was franchised in 1963. They have over 560 units open now across all states. The total investment ranges anywhere between $250,000 to about $360,000, and they're looking for somebody with minimum liquid cash of $90,000, and this could actually be cash. It could be a stock portfolio you could liquidate. It could be a home rental property you could sell. Right, anything that you can get to the capital within 2 to 3 months, and a minimum net worth of $250,000. The franchise fee, usually between $40,000 and $60,000, is on the low end here. It's $39,500, and the average number of employees is 4 to 5 per location. So really cool. We'll get into the numbers in terms of how much they make, what it looks like day to day, and just about anything else you can think to ask. So let's get to it. It's great to have you here on the podcast. We're looking forward to speaking about Amco. It's got a huge history, but let's first start with you. Can you give us a brief introduction of you and what you've done and how you got to where you are today with Amco?
Sure. Thanks, Josh. Thanks for that. And it's great to be here. My name's Tom Shoolbraid. I am currently the Director of Franchise Development at Amco Transmissions and Total Car Care. I started with Amco in 1987. I haven't been with Amco that entire time. That is, 38 years ago. But I will say every time I find myself departing Amco, they draw me back. And so this is my third tour of duty with them. And of those 38 years or so since 1987, pretty much participated and had almost every role and responsibility within the company. And I've been with Amco particularly for roughly 27 or 28 of those 38 years. So, and the rest of the time I've been in the automotive aftermarket. I spent time with LKQ, and I spent time also with another big chain known as Monroe Mufflers and Brakes. They're a big national chain as well. So, so that's my brief background, Josh.
Yeah, so there's few people, I bet, in Amco that's been there for longer than you have. So you're the guy to talk to.
But believe it or not, there are a few.
There are. That's awesome. Yeah. I think I saw on the FTD you have someone who's now he's like a director or the COO or something that's been around since like 2007 or something like that.
That's our president.
The president.
Who's been it's nearly 20 years, about 18, 19 years. That's Bruce Chidsey. But he's been in automotive because before that, he spent about 25 years with Pep Boys. So his entire career essentially is in automotive. He actually he's very technical. He started as changing tires with Pep Boys, then he rose through the ranks, and then he went into operations and then became a vice president or senior vice president of Pep Boys. And then it was around that time he jumped ship, if you say, and came over to Amco, and now he's our president.
Very cool. Yeah, so you guys have a deep bench for sure. All right, so let's jump into Amco then. In 30 seconds to a minute, can you kind of explain what Amco does and what makes it special?
So we fix cars, okay? We have since 1963. This is our year in business. We are a 100% franchise operation. We have no corporate-owned stores. So all of our locations are independently owned and operated by our franchisees. We are, and this is going to sound like a bold statement, but it's true, and everyone's welcome to do their own due diligence, but we actually are the only retail automotive national chain that literally works on everything under the hood of a car. And the big differentiators, side, different from all of the rest, is the powertrain, or the big stuff, or the most complex stuff, i.e. transmissions and engines, repairs, overhauls, and replacements. None of the other chains
Okay.
have really any interest in doing those big complex repairs, which is what we cut our teeth on, because we're still known as the transmission specialists 62 years after we started.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So what's kind of the percentage of revenue? I don't know if you can give this, but like what's the percentage of work in general, I guess you could say, that's those big items versus like the smaller items?
So what a great question. So we do have those numbers. On averages overall across the chain, roughly 70% of our revenue stream comes via major complex repairs, transmissions and engines, and to a lesser degree, transfer cases and differentials. These are the big money, the big complex items in any automobile, okay? But it's about 30% of our customer base. So 70% of the revenue, 30% of the customer base. About 20, sometimes 24 years ago or so, we became Amco Transmissions and Total Car Care. So that's when we started doing everything. So at Amco, yes, we could still do your transmission or engine, but we also could do tune-ups, oil changes, tires, brakes, exhaust, etc. And today, that type of work, that what we call total car care or general automotive repair type work, accounts for roughly 30% of our top line revenue, but 70% of our customer base.
Mm. Yeah, and I guess it's like a good funnel for, people trust you and then they'll come to you when they have bigger problems.
Exactly right, because at
Yeah,
most
yeah.
of the other chains who also have customers, they do oil changes, inspections, brake jobs, tires. Eventually, if and when something catastrophic happens to their transmission or engines, by and large, and 99 times out of 100, they have to send them away. We, on the other hand, do not.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. That's very interesting. Okay. And so let's get a little bit then we have a sense of kind of what the business does. Let's get into like the customer journey, and I like to cut it up in like who does it, right? So how do you guys acquire customers? Is it the franchisee mostly doing it? Is it the franchisor? And then just go through the entire kind of
Sure.
process there and kind of what that looks like.
So I'll start with marketing and advertising. At
Sure.
Amco, we're one of the few, if only, brand that has a very decentralized, franchisee-driven marketing and advertising program and process. So we do not run national ad campaigns. We do, okay, with a committee we call the NCC. It's called the National Creative Committee. It's made up of 80% of its members, franchisees all over the world. I'm sorry, all over the country. We're not to the world yet. That's another piece of this. Our expansion efforts going on abroad, all over the country. And 20% of that committee is made up of corporate employees, mostly from the marketing team. Okay, and that committee decides what the commercials look like, the actual making and production of the commercials, hiring the actors, the directors, the editors, etc., and creating the actual commercials that we all might either hear on radio or some other media, or watch on TV or YouTube or some other visual media. Okay, and they're cut into 10, 30, and 60-second spots, and then distributed out amongst our entire franchisee base. From there are all of our franchisees in markets, major markets, let's say LA, Chicago, New York, Dallas, Tampa, etc. They're arranged or organized in what we call advertising pools. And in very democratic fashion, those franchisees in those local markets get together regularly, at least once a month, and with input and recommendations and suggestions from their assigned marketing manager from corporate, who will make suggestions like, hey, this is how much you all should spend in this market. This is why you should spend it, where you should spend it, what you should spend, how you should spend it. But ultimately, All those decisions are solely decided by the franchisees, and they take a vote, and majority rules. And that's how it's done. So from there, obviously, customers are attracted. We do have a long-standing, well-known tagline, Josh. It started in the in the late 60s with our first spokesperson. Her name was Zsa Zsa Gabor, for those who are old enough to remember Zsa Zsa Gabor. But it goes something like AA, beep, beep, MCO. And so most all of our advertising that you might see or hear ends with a beep beep MCO. Actually, if you're familiar with Curb Your Enthusiasm, that TV show by Larry David, they actually created an episode called Amco, and that tagline and Amco was throughout the episode. Really, the beautiful part about that, we had no idea that they were creating an episode all about Amco.
Yeah, I was gonna say, did you sponsor that? That's so funny.
We didn't. They just created it. So talk about name brand recognition. Talk about essentially free marketing, a very popular TV show, right?
Yeah.
But we've also been recently in the last 6 months at Jeopardy. We were actually on Jeopardy 2 different episodes within the last 6 to 8 months. We were part of the question. Okay, we were an answer. Like, one was what iconic automotive brand and company did Robert Morgan co-found? And the answer, of course, was Amco. And then there was another question. So we get visibility still to this day based on the fact that we're an empire, iconic brand, been around as long as we have, over 60 years, right? 6 decades. So we attract customers. Most of our customers do not drive in. They call us first, okay? And that's why the nice part about opening a new Amco, for example, is we always say, unlike a lot of the other guys, we don't have to be on Main Street. We could be a block off Main because we don't get a lot of drive-in. Okay, think about it. If your check engine light's on, or your car's bucking, or it's smoking profusely, unless it's happening right then and you happen to see an Amco, typically people are calling because they're very nervous, right? They're like, oh my God, what's wrong with my vehicle? How much is it going to cost? Right? So they call. So, so the customers contact us. We have obviously processes and procedures in place to sort of try to make them feel at ease, okay, and get them in and just check it out. All we always initially try to do, let's just figure out what's wrong, because our data and our stats show forever that more than half the time, whatever the reason our customers come to us, it's a relatively minor, simple, inexpensive repair, okay? And that's been going on for decades, all right? What's that? And that handle, our sort of front person, Josh, in our stores is what we call a CSM, or customer service manager. He or she is really the main customer interfacing person. He or she typically handles like making sure that we have the right inventory, parts, ordering parts, preparing estimates, and selling the repairs that are needed. Okay. They also, in most cases, are the main production scheduler. Okay, because lots of factors go into production scheduling. It is not what some people might believe, first in, first out, always. Okay, of course that's a factor, but other factors are the parts there? Are the parts available to do the work? Also, sometimes customers will say, believe it or not, hey, I'm going out of town. I don't need the car back till next week. Take your time whenever you get it in, because even if you get it done tomorrow, I can't pick it up till next Wednesday. Okay. So that's a factor versus the customer that might be with their family and they're traveling through or on vacation and they break down, and until their car is fixed, they're staying in a local hotel. So usually they'll take a priority, right? To get them back on the road. It's the right thing to do. So all those sort of things sort of factor in to scheduling the work. Then of course the work gets done and the customer is, we deliver the vehicle back to the customer, and we have a specific car delivery procedure, by the way, that is more than just, hey, here's your keys. I'll swipe the credit card. Thank you for your business. Okay. We believe it should be much more involved, because at Amco, all right, it is not uncommon. Think about it, right? I told you before, we're known for complex repairs. Well, those complex repairs come with a hefty price tag. It's not unusual to be $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 for an engine or a transmission job, right? So we believe that requires and deserves more than just a simple handshake, thanks for your business. So we have a whole process and how to quote unquote deliver the car. And we don't mean deliver it to their place of work or their home, but just to try to make them feel comfortable that two things. A, they made the right decision to fix their car. And B, even more importantly, they chose us to do it. Because in our world, Josh, we never really expect a customer to drive away happy. Let's face it, who's ever going to be happy to spend $5,000 on a new transmission, right? That's really not a happy occasion. However, right? However, it is reasonable to shoot for and drive to at least have them drive away satisfied. Because if they're satisfied, okay, that's the key. If they ever have another problem with the car, if they were satisfied with the work and your service and professionalism, yes, they're very likely to come back. Even better, what do the stats say? The average household in this country has, on average, 2.5 cars in their driveway. So you fix one, maybe you'll get a chance to fix or maintain or the other 1.5 in everybody's driveway in this country. Not to mention colleagues, coworkers, neighbors, relatives, etc. And that's how you build a business. That's how you build customer loyalty. And that's sort of, in a nutshell, hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, okay. So just to kind of recap, and because you guys have been around for so long, you have experienced franchisees, right? I think they've been around. I mean, some of these guys have been around for decades and decades, right? So you have the size and the experience for people to really make independent decisions guided by experts on the marketing, right? And then once they're in there, you have a very well-trained front office person who's treating them right, who's doing the right scheduling, making sure everything gets handled smoothly. And then when it's handed back to them, it's done in a way where they're satisfied. They feel like you guys took care of them. They're not happy that they just burned a $5,000 hole in their pocket, right? They're probably happy they don't have to buy a new car though, because that'd be way more than $5,000. And that just brings them back, right? So is that about right for the?
It is. I mean, to just piggyback on what you said, yes, we have franchisees been with us decades. We have many second and, believe it or not, even some third generation franchisees. A good friend of mine, since I started in '87, we all get to know each other over these years, okay? I have a good friend of mine. He's a franchisee in New Jersey. His grandfather opened that Amco back in the late 60s, okay?
Wow.
So, and that's not unusual. Even further, to sort of drive that point home, and we're very proud of this, Josh, our average tenured franchisee, okay, in our chain across well over 500 franchises is 19 and a half years, okay?
The average?
That's the average length of time our franchisees have been with us. So
yeah, that's crazy.
We're really proud of that. And the other piece I'll add, it's a little bit off, a little bit of a left turn, but it kind of goes along with that sort of stat, is the fact that we don't have a lot of resales. For a chain our size, we don't really have a lot of resales at any one time. And most of the time when we do, it's handled internally. Very common for a franchisee who's exiting our system to sell his or her business to their longtime manager or mechanic, lead technician. That's very common. Or a family member, like I mentioned before, a son, a daughter, a son-in-law, a daughter-in-law. And by the way, our franchisees take on all walks of life. Very diverse. Women, every religion, race, it's really again something else we're very proud of. And it's all because it's all about giving an opportunity for somebody and his or her family to obtain some financial independence, for many years to come.
Yeah, so that's a good segue. Actually, the next thing I was going to ask about is about franchisees. But real quick, before we get into the qualitative traits of a good franchisee, what's the average number of Amco locations that a owner has right now in the system? Do you know?
So, you know what? I don't know. I can't answer that. I don't know the answer to that question exactly, but I can tell you this. The number, 30% of our franchises are multi-location owners. And to put that in perspective, 10 short years ago, that number was 15%. So we are growing. We're in major growth mode. And in part, what's adding fuel to that organic internal growth is two things. One, the technology. that we all have available today. In our case, for one, our POS system is cloud-based. So our franchisees can access detailed data about their business, literally from the palm of their hand, from their device, as long as they have internet connection. Anywhere in the country, frankly, anywhere in the world. Sales today, cash collected today, sales this week versus last week, sales this month versus same month last year, sales this month versus all the other Amcos in my market this month or last month. I mean, and the list goes on, right? That's that old adage, Josh. In order to manage any business effectively, you first must be able to measure that business effectively. And again, I'm not suggesting this is unique or different at Amco. Many businesses operate this way. But what it's afforded us to do, that coupled with the lessons many of us have learned through COVID, I mean, let's face it, right? While more and more companies are bringing people back to the office, right, and settling usually in some sort of hybrid situation, what many of us learned is, you know what? Yes, you can manage a team effectively from afar, right? You can lead a group of professionals remotely. And so our franchisees have grasped onto those two factors. And not only are they growing, Josh, the really exciting part is they're growing outside of their own markets. We have, for example, two partners. They just had a grand opening in a location in the state of South Carolina. And by the end of the year, they're going to open up their 10th location in the state of Georgia, which will give them now 10 stores across 4 different states.
Wow.
Okay. 20, 30 years ago, that literally wasn't possible. All right. We have another who's got 3 locations in South Florida, and he's about to open a 4th location in New England. Okay. Which is, again, exciting. And again, 20, 30 years ago, that wouldn't have been possible. All right.
Right.
So we're really excited about our growth that we're experiencing and that we expect to continue. But we always realize there's going to be a healthy balance, right, between internal organic growth and external growth, bringing new people in from the outside.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay, great. So then let's go in now to the actual qualities of those owners, right? So when you're speaking to someone and, you know, what are you telling them that if you want to be a great owner, the personality traits, the professional experience, the skills, whatever it is that you look for in a great franchise owner?
Great question. So first and foremost, we tell them what they don't have to be, because this is the question we get most often is, hey, Tom, I don't know anything about a car. I don't know anything about mechanics. I don't even know what a transmission looks like. Okay. To which I say, well, guess what? In 1987, neither did I. All right. And secondly, I say, that's okay. We don't even require it. If you have it, it's not going to hurt you. But we require people with operational business acumen. All right. You don't have to be a mechanic or know how to work on cars or know what a transmission is or does, because frankly, we don't want nor expect our franchisees to fix cars. We want them to run the business and operate the business. And the best example I can give, Josh, is if you ever sort of read, let's say, the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or other Forbes magazine, you see movement amongst CEOs and other C-suite high-level executives. And many times they're moving from industry to industry. So obviously they're not experts in those industries, but they have the traits that apply no matter what business you're running. And frankly, let's face it, our franchisees, they're CEOs, right? It's a small business, of course, but they still have to be concerned with staffing, hiring, managing, keeping your staff motivated and loyal, right? HR issues, health insurance issues, production flow, expenses, margins, costs, profit margins, right? I mean, the list goes on and on. It's not unlike most other high-level executives, no matter what business or industry you're in. So what are we looking for? People with that sort of background, that sort of mindset, that kind of acumen, right? Don't worry about the fact that you don't know a transmission from an engine. We will make sure you get the experts you need to perform the actual work, right? It's more about, and then we go on to say, after we've trained our franchisees, and with each passing month, especially that first year, within 6 months to a year, no matter what your background, okay, you will know more about vehicles, cars, mechanics, at automotive, etc., than 99% of the motoring public.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, I mean, and that makes sense too, right? So, like, my wife and I own a kids dance franchise, and we don't know how to dance, right?
There you
But
go.
all we do, like, the main focus is we need to be able to sell, and we need to be able to hire and train, right? Like, that's if you can do that, the franchise gives you everything else, right? So, like, what are the things that franchisees need to be good at, or they're spending most of their day doing to make sure that this business is performing at its, the best it could be?
So first operationally, right? Getting the right crew, and we help them, right? We have a recruiting department. We will help you. We'll do all
Oh
the
wow,
grunt work.
okay.
We'll screen all the resumes. We'll do the first phone screening interviews and present our franchisees qualified candidates. But
Wow.
ultimately,
Holy cow. That's crazy.
but
I've never heard that before. That's crazy.
right. So we're happy to do it. Okay.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the hiring and firing decisions are up to our franchisees because, after all, it's their business.
Right. Right.
And I always say, in my career, I've interviewed plenty of people who check the boxes, skill set wise, right? But after the interview, I'm like, no way am I offering them the job because it wasn't a good fit. It didn't feel right, whatever the reason. We've all been through that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I tell any candidate, any potential franchisee candidate who's looking into us, right, looking at Amco as a solution for them and their family, I would say it's the same thing with us and it's the same thing with this business. But, and that's not just startup, Josh. That's, if you've been with us 20, 30 years, maybe your manager retires or one of your mechanics relocates for whatever reason to a different state. You still call us up. That support is obviously available for new franchisees coming into the system, but it's always there. With the marketing, as I mentioned before, now we're talking about recruiting. It's always out there and available for all of our franchisees the whole time we're partnered up together.
Okay. So they need some business acumen. They need to be able to manage people, right? They need to be able to operationally, right? There's a lot going on in the shop and stuff. Is that really it? Like, if they can manage the store, the operations, and they can manage people, is that really what they're doing day to day, and everything else is kind of handled by the franchise?
Well, as they get better at it and they really settle in with the right crew, they can step away from day-to-day shop operations and focus more on growing the business. Like, how do I attract more customers in the form of fleet, national, local fleet, and wholesale customers, because they're all over the place. We, of course, have dozens of national fleet partners where Amco is preferred national vendor. First of all, you have your standalone fleets, Josh, like for example, FedEx, UPS, and Amazon, but you also have a whole segment known as the Fleet Management Company bucket, FMC. What these companies are, none of them have fleets. What they are is third-party fleet administrators. Their customers are large corporate fleets. Best example I can give you, take a pharmaceutical company. We probably know people who worked at pharmaceutical companies. Well, they have large sales and marketing teams, right? Hundreds, if not 1,000 or two, who drive around in company cars all day, visiting doctors, health clinics, hospitals, etc. Right? Coupled with the fact that most large corporations like that offer as a perk or a benefit to their senior level executives a company car to use. So when you add it all up, these corporations like J&J, Pfizer, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Comcast Cable, they have 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 vehicles in their fleet. That's a huge expense. If you ask an executive at a pharmaceutical company, what do you know about managing a fleet? You know what their answer is going to be?
Nada.
Nothing. So they have a choice. They can either hire out an entire department of fleet management experts, or more often than not, they hire what's known as a FMC or fleet management company, third-party fleet administrator to do it for them, for a fee, of course. But the point is, Amco, there's about 24 of these companies in this country. We're a preferred national vendor of every single one of them. Estimates have it that together, combined, these FMCs manage about 20 million corporate fleet vehicles. So a nice big pie. Right now, you're not going to get all of them into one center because it's spread out all over the place. But it's a nice, supplement to your retail business, right? Through fleet, because everything's done. Pricing's preset, because they all want the same three things, Josh: standardized pricing, standardized process, standardized warranty. No matter where my company client driver, right, employee is in the whole country. I know if I send them to Amco, I know that those three things are going to be set and standard no matter what state or what region. That's a beautiful thing for them. Okay. That makes it things very easy for them. You know what I mean? And they all want it. And then on a local level, local fleets want the same thing. They just don't have the leverage to negotiate as good a deal, right? But we teach our franchisees and their managers how to go after, who to go after, because we're talking about other small businesses. For example, HVAC companies, construction companies, landscaping companies, right? These could be small businesses. They might only have 5 or 10 vehicles in their fleet. And I often say, because people ask me, come on, Tom, what the heck's an account with 10 vehicles going to really do to my business checking account? I mean, really? And the answer is, you're right. It's not going to do much. However, if you have 10 or 15 or 20 of them, and many of our franchisees do, now you're talking about a nice little chunk here. You're talking about between those small business accounts, you're probably on average working on one vehicle every week of the year, every year, year after year after year. Couple that with the FMC and the standalone fleet business. Okay, now you're talking about maybe 1 or 2 or 3 vehicles on average every single week.
Yeah, and that's on top of your normal calls from random
Retail.
people.
That's right.
Yeah, so the owners out there, an owner who really wants to blow this up needs to be willing to do that kind of calling on business owners and say, hey, trust us to take good care of your cars and to not, to play it straight. We'll do it in a good time, right? So that's another skill the owner needs to have.
And the fact is, most of them coming in already have that skill because they're already doing it. Because it's about getting involved, for example, in the local Better Business Bureau, the local Chamber of Commerce, and other business type organizations. Many of our candidates and many business people are already involved in one kind of organization or another like that. So they don't even realize, well, when they start thinking about, wow, yeah, I know a lot of people potentially, that potentially could be a customer,
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty exciting. And by the way, I didn't even mention the other big chunk in our national account book of business, and that's called the extended service contract, Josh, revenue stream. Who are these people? Well, first of all, you probably get the same calls I get, and many of us get on our cell phones, right? It goes something like that robocall. It goes something like, hey, did you know the warranty on your vehicle is about to expire or just expired? Press 1, and I'll get you. You can get an extended service contract or send a warranty for the next 3 years of 50,000 miles for like $30 a month or $40 a month. Some of the big companies like that are advertising a lot lately are CarShield, Endurance. You may have seen 1 or 2 of their commercials. I think Ice-T, that old rapper, is the spokesperson for one of them. I think it's CarShield.
Yeah, I think I've seen that commercial.
But these companies, there's dozens of these companies, okay, all over the place. And the nice thing about this is every used car dealership, even the ones attached to the new car dealers, virtually every one of them offers extended service contracts to their customers, okay? Amco is a national preferred vendor. I can't say of every one of them because there's a lot of them, but most every one of them, and certainly just about all of the biggest ones. Okay, so another tremendous opportunity for revenue, and it's just a matter of, connecting those dots in the local market. And again, we teach and train our new franchisees as well as their manager on how to do that.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay. So, that covers the skills, how you're getting customers in. I think one thing that we haven't touched on that I was quite impressed by Amco, and it's probably a question people are thinking right now, right, is like, okay, I don't know anything about cars, and nobody else is doing these difficult fixes, right? How do I find guys to do that, right? And Amco has a very unique kind of solution to that. So I don't know if you want to talk about it.
So yeah, I kind of mentioned it before. We have a recruiting department. We'll help you find them. Okay.
Well,
they're out there. So
and like the school, right? You just have the school.
Well. So first of all, we find them, and then what we do is we offer this robust training. I could tell you that our founders, from the very beginning, they looked at and they viewed training as a competitive advantage, because even in 1963, they said they knew intuitively, they knew that the car makers would always and constantly make design improvements and technological advancements in automobile manufacturing. Now, let's be honest, there's no way they could have foreseen an EV one day, all right? That's probably not. But let's remember, in 1963, front-wheel drive didn't even exist yet. Okay. And today, like then, the normal average factory warranty is between 3 and 5 years when you buy a new car, right? So for the first 3 to 5 years, if you have anything that really goes wrong with your car, you can bring it back to the dealer basically for free because it's covered under warranty, right? But once that factory warranty expires, the consumer looks to the aftermarket in droves. One reason is pretty well known and logical, because we are less expensive than a dealer. At Amco, for example, we're 10 to 25% less expensive for the exact same repair. And by the way, in many cases, the same warranty, and in some cases, even a better warranty. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is less known, but it's very important, and that is sense of urgency. I don't know the last time, Josh, you or anybody in the audience called a dealer for any reason. It's still, on average, you call a dealer today, my check engine light, I need an inspection, I need routine oil change, whatever. It's very difficult to call a dealer today and get in today, or call a dealer today and get in tomorrow, or even call a dealer today and get in sometime within the next week. Many times it's a week or two, sometimes even further out. And if my check engine light just went on, or I got this weird noise or my car's vibrating, I don't want to wait that long. At Amco, from the very start, in the 1963 and still today, we end most phone calls with people who call us let's just say, hey, Josh, thank you for calling. I understand you have that check engine light. We got to get it checked out sooner than later. Would you like to bring that in right now or drop it off on the way home from work tonight? Or would you prefer to drop it off on the way home from work tonight or bring it in first thing tomorrow morning when we open at 8 o'clock? Which do you prefer, Josh? Now, we may or may not be able to fix it right away because we don't even know what's wrong with it yet, right? But at least we give the consumer, right? We show professionalism, we show empathy, we show sense of urgency. Hey, we understand you're not happy about this. This is a very, you have a lot of trepidation, right? There's a lot of nervousness about it, right? So the least we can do is get you the answers you need. What's wrong? How much is it going to cost to fix? And equally important, how long is it going to take? Because we are a creature that needs our cars, right, Josh? Mm-hmm. And we don't want to. And so I always say, like, calling your mechanic is kind of like calling a dentist. Nobody really wants to go to their dentist, right? Let's be honest. And no one really wants to go to their mechanic, right? Because it's unpleasant. We don't really know much. It's going to cost us some money. Let's be honest, right? And I always say this. But so the least we can do is, again, be professional and show a sense of urgency and understand that the customers, they're very nervous, man. They don't know what to think and everybody assumes the worst when you don't know about things, right, Josh? You assume the worst. Oh, my God, it's going to be $5,000 and they're going to need it for 2 weeks. What am I going to do? We're supposed to go on vacation or go away to the lake this weekend how am I going to get my kids to their soccer games this week? Whatever the case may be, right? And like I said before, more than half the time, guess what? It turns out to be not that big a deal, right? So that's sort of a big advantage we have. And, something we're pretty proud of. We've always done it. So back to your sort of original question. So back to the training piece, right? So that 3 to 5 year factory warranty from the start, our co-founders and still today, we looked at that as our runway to figure out what's needed, what tooling, equipment, and most importantly, what training do we have to impart to our chain so when the factory warranty expires and we know the consumers are going to look to the aftermarket and Amco in particular, we're going to be ready, right? We will be ready. So and back to your point, we have Amco University. Okay, it's actually a brick and mortar building. Our headquarters, Amco's corporate headquarters, is where I'm located, just my office, is outside of Philadelphia, Horsham, Pennsylvania. Our university actually is outside of Atlanta, Georgia. Okay, it's a state-of-the-art facility. We claim, of course, I'm biased. So we say it is the state-of-the-art training facility in our industry. But to be fair and objective, I think talk to anybody in the industry and they would at least put that our training facility and program in the top 3 or 5 within the industry at the very worst. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Nevertheless, it is a state-of-the-art facility where we conduct franchisee training, center manager training, technical training, anywhere from entry level all the way up to and including master certified techs. Because part of our university, we actually have a mock Amco center, real lifts, compressors, tools, equipment, scanning, so when technicians come to the university for training, make no mistake, it's roll your sleeves up, turn wrenches, get your hands dirty, on the job training. So we also have online training, Josh, okay? Over 1,100 modules. It's so comprehensive and so robust. I'm proud to say that if for some reason you can't get your employees to our university outside of Atlanta, strictly online, you could take an entry-level tech right out of tech school. And through our online program, they could become a master certified tech without ever stepping foot in the university. It's possible. Obviously, that's not going to take a few months or anything. That's going to be over the course of a few years, because when it comes to automotive mechanics, it's more like an apprenticeship, I like to say, right? Think of it as an apprenticeship, not like a university. You go and study and become an engineer, then you graduate and now you go work at an engineering firm or something. You know what I mean? It's more like an apprenticeship, it's a craft, right? It's like a cabinet maker, an electrician, those sorts of things.
Yeah. And I mean, just from a retention standpoint, that has to help a lot. You got this guy and he just sees this obvious upward mobility and be able to hone his craft. That's huge.
No question about it. Again, I always said, and from where I am personally, that a good mechanic when they want to learn more, because they understand the more they learn, the better they get. The better they get, the more money they make.
Yeah.
The more valuable they become.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a way to retain them and build loyalty. I could point to pretty much all of our most successful or more successful, above average, let's say, franchisees, average to above average, and they will all point to a staff that's been with them 5, 10, 20 plus years. Mm-hmm. Okay? But that goes back to your other question. What do we look for? That goes back to that skill set of how to manage a team. Okay? Part of managing a team effectively is maintaining that team effectively, right? Yep. So they're not jumping ship. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So, it's, and again, nothing special about Amco there. I don't care what industry or business you're in. If you have high turnover, I always said, you want to know the problem? Look to management. Any business, any company that has high turnover, I would say look at the leadership and you probably find your answers.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. All right. I think we have a pretty good idea there. Let's move into kind of the market, right, and competition. So whatever you can share with us about the general automotive market, about the people who visit your stores, about how competition's been, market share, anything around that aspect, we'd love to hear it.
Great. So let's start high level. The automotive aftermarket industry is about a $450 billion industry today. It's expected to grow at a very modest 2, 3, 4%. For the next many years, reaching close to $700 billion within the next 10 years, okay? I always say this, Josh. If you want, it's not sexy. Automotive's not sexy. It's not startup. It's not high tech. It's not .com. It's not invest today and 5 or 10 times your money in 2 or 3 years. That's not us. However, if you want something steady as she goes, you want something that's been around a long time and has showed consistent year over year growth, and is projected to continue that year-over-year growth well into the future, then automotive may just be the perfect fit for you. If you looked at a chart over the last 20 years, you would see in the automotive aftermarket, year over year, 2, 3, 4% growth every single year with 2 exceptions. Number one, the 08-09 banking and housing crisis, we all remember, right? And by the way, when we didn't grow, but it wasn't like the bottom fell out. It was just like a little blip, almost flat. And then, of course, more recently, COVID for 2020. Every other year, growth. I don't know which way you're looking at me, but you know what I mean.
Eh,
Growth. Okay.
up
Um,
and to the right.
and
Yeah.
yeah, our industry experts expect that to continue. So that's a tremendous tailwind for us. Coupled with the fact that there's nearly 300 million registered vehicles in this country. That's a lot, right? That
It's a
number's
lot.
projected to continue to grow. That's sort of the size of the pie, if you will. Even better than that, the average age, this is probably going to surprise you, surprises most people. The average age of those 300 million vehicles is over 12 years. All right.
Yeah.
So that means even better than that. Think about it. That means if the average is 12, for every brand new car that's rolling out off the showroom floor, there's another vehicle in this country fully operational driving around that's 24 years old because the
Yeah.
average is 12.
And it's got to be going up, right? Because
It is
cars, I
going
feel like
up.
cars are lasting longer.
It's going up. That was my next point. It's 12 and a half now. It's expected to reach 15 by just the end of the decade in the next 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah. That
Now,
makes sense.
come back to the competition. I told you before, we're the only national chain, right, that works on everything under the hood, primarily, or the differentiation primarily is the powertrain, engines and transmissions. Well, go back to the factory warranty. 3-5 years goes. Now, where am I going to go for my brakes, my tune-ups, my oil changes, my normal sort of routine maintenance? You have a lot of choices. Pep Boys, Monroe, Meineke, Firestone, Goodyear, Mavis. We all do all of that, right? However, like I told you before, none of those other companies, none of those other chains, I know because I actually worked for one, and I know people because I've been in this industry for 38 years. I know a lot of people in all these companies, right? You get to know people, right?
Mm-hmm.
None of them market, promote, advertise, and most importantly, train on the most complex components, i.e. transmissions and engines, okay? So the factory warranty expires. They look to the aftermarket in droves. And with the average age at 12 going to 15, we all know cars at 3, 5, 6, 7 years, they need brakes, they need tires, tune-ups, right? Maybe you need, maybe an alternator here and there, right? A starter, those sorts of things. Relatively simple, relatively inexpensive. But guess what? What starts happening at year 8, 10, 12, 15? Transmissions and engines start to fail.
Yeah.
And that's right in our wheelhouse because those other places, they have a long-time customer, as we mentioned before, right, Josh? Now their engine, let's say their engine blows up or whatever. In most cases, they're going to get turned away. They can't help them. Believe it or not, if our operators and our managers have done a good job, they got a relationship with the local, say, Pep Boys and say, hey, if you ever got a transmission issue, feel free to send it over here. We'll work out some sort of referral system.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That happens.
Yeah.
So it's so exciting. I can't tell you. And the other thing you should know in our business, the typically, Josh, the more complex the repair, the more labor intensive it is. And the more labor intensive a repair, the greater the margin.
Mm-hmm.
Margins are better in our business in labor than they are in parts. And the reason is simple. With parts, we all buy parts pretty much from the same suppliers. You can only, the cost is the cost, and you can only mark parts up so much, right?
Right. Because I can just look it up on my phone, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You can only mark parts up so much. Labor, it's not that you mark labor up or anything, but labor-intensive work, more hours you could charge for legitimately. Don't get me wrong, legitimately, of course. It's just, it creates higher margin type repairs. And that's our niche, okay?
Yeah.
To drive that point home, most of those other chains look to attract between 20 and 30 customers a day in order to maintain a profitable business. Okay? At minimum. At Amco, guess what? We're like 20 to 30 a week.
Oh, wow.
Right?
That's way better. Yeah. I like that.
Right? It's just
Because if you think about it, right? I mean, like you're saying, like just make this concrete, right? If I'm changing oil, I make $10 in profit, let's say on average from an oil change, $20, right?
Mhm.
I got to push those guys through to make $1,000, right?
Let's think about
But
how
with
many
you
you have
guys,
to do a day.
yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas someone comes in with a transmission, and I'm charging them whatever, right? Maybe I only have to do one to make the same thing because of just how much longer it takes, right? And it's again, like you said, you're not doing anything unethical. It takes a long time to fix one of those. Like that's not a simple, pour some fluid in and be done with it.
That's right.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I like that. Now, that's something I had never really considered. And then it makes it a little bit easier too, right? If you're the niche player, you only need to find a couple guys a week to hit the numbers that you want to hit. I feel like that's an easier for like a brand new owner. That's just an easier thing to do, right?
You can get up and going quicker. I could tell you this. The interest level we have, not in Automotive and at Amco in particular, is just, I got to tell you, it's exciting. So much interest, so many leads, so much, contacting, finding out information because the word is getting out. The dirty little secret, because Automotive was always viewed, it's a little dirty. I don't know much about it. I'd rather look at food service or whatever the other brands, other industries are. Nothing against any of the other brands, but the margins in Automotive, the secrets getting out are are strong, man, are good. And now coupled with the fact that you can start scaling more and better and more widely than ever before, that's why we're in such major growth mode, Josh. And we're so excited here at Amco. And we've grown our internal multi-center franchisees. We've doubled it 15 to 30%. And we think that's going to continue. We have over 500 locations, I mentioned before, but we have over 300 open territories just in the U.S. And our new president, Bruce, I told you about. He's relatively new as our president. He's not new to Amco. He's been a president now, I think, coming up on 3 years. He was our vice president of technical, our vice president of operations for the previous, 15, 16 years. But he, has a strategic sort of goal in mind to really blow this thing out abroad. So we're aggressively looking to expand. We are in Canada already, but we have growth. We have room for growth in Canada, just like the U.S. But I'm talking about overseas. I'm talking about, we just had a colleague of mine, two colleagues were in India for a franchise show. So we have something, we're in talks, serious talks with a couple of groups in India, a couple of groups in Africa, a couple of groups in Latin America. We're excited, man. We're taking this thing global.
That's very cool. That's very cool. All right. So let's, probably another 10, 15 minutes here.
Sure.
So let's get into some of the numbers, right? So start off with, and for those who don't know, what I'm asking about is the franchise disclosure document. It's a 23-item document. Every franchise has to file with the Federal Trade Commission, and all items are the same topics, right? So item 7 are startup costs with full breakdowns, and item 19 are earnings claims, right? So every franchise can make different earnings claims, and then whatever is not in those, you have to get the information from franchisees, right? So let's talk about item 7, startup costs. Let's talk about item 19, earnings claims for Amco.
Sure. So high level, I always cover this on the very first call. High level, our total investment to open is somewhere between $250,000 and $400,000, and that's all in. That includes, for example, go ahead. I'm sorry, you had a quick question?
It just seems, I guess you're about to go through it now, but that seems very low for an auto company. So I'd like you to explain why is it so low? So, but yeah, go ahead.
So let me get through and I'll answer that question. Don't let me forget. So $250,000 to $400,000 total investment to open. It is all in. For example, our one-time licensing fee is $39,500. That's included in that range. It also includes roughly about $70,000 or so in working capital. It's part of that range. We are not talking about, and this partly answers your question, I think, John. We're not talking about buying a piece of land or building a new facility. That's not what this is. We will find an existing location. And by the way, it doesn't even have to be automotive. Ideally it is, but it doesn't have to be. For example, we had a new franchisee come into the system out in the Midwest last year. The perfect location turned out to be a Rite Aid drugstore that had recently closed. If you remember, Rite Aid had a downsize last year. They closed about 150 or so locations around the country. Well, in this particular market, there were one of those Rite Aids had been closed, but it checked all the boxes for a successful Amco center, perfect location for an Amco center. So We just retrofitted the building automotive. You have to punch some holes in the wall, create a 14-foot bay door, few 14-foot bay doors, install lifts. So in that case, I say to candidates that ended up being closer to the higher end of the range, toward the 400,000, because we had a retrofitted automotive. If we find an automotive building, it's going to cost a little less, probably push it towards the lower end of the range. So
how often does that happen, right? Where there's just like automotive buildings for sale or for rent?
we do it all the time.
Really? Okay,
the
so that's
time.
like a normal thing.
It's not unusual because you have other. You got to remember, we're one of the few franchise only operations. So take for example Monroe. I don't, if you, in our industry, Monroe's a big player. They have about 1,300 locations nationwide. They're all corporate. No, there's no franchise. They just closed. It's just public data. They just closed 145 of their locations. Okay.
So they're boom, right overnight. There's 145 potential spaces,
depending on if it syncs up. So I would not be surprised if we end up rebranding what used to be a Monroe location into an Amco center somewhere in this country 1 or 2 times this year and in the years to follow. It wouldn't surprise me. Okay.
Yeah.
So
okay.
that's sort of how. So that's sort of your total investment. So the FDD, our FDD, and I always tell candidates, I said, as we continue down this process, it's an 8-step process for us, okay? It's not something you do overnight. This ain't quick, right? This is a big decision, lots of money, and we want to make sure it's a good fit for us and a good fit for you and your family. So I always say, though, as we talk, whenever you think, well, how much does that cost or what's that expense? Just remember this, whatever it is, it's within that total investment startup range of between 250 and 400. Okay. So that's high level. Excuse me. That's the tools and equipment, branding, sign surveys, signage. Maybe you have to paint the place, some minor renovations or remodeling, et cetera, all in. And that's why it's such a range. Because sometimes, Josh, people say, damn, you guys have been doing this for over 60 years. You can't narrow that up a little bit. That's all like $150,000 range. Well, that's
Yeah. And also like rent's gonna be way different and materials and contractor costs. I guess so going back to the question I asked and you said don't let you forget, right? Is like I've seen oil change places that are 600,000, right? On the high end. So like how could you, which is a full body everything, be less, right? So like that's what I'm very interested in.
So the quick lube places, most of them have pits. So that's a big expense to actually create a pit and a hole in the floor. Because remember, when you go into a Jiffy Lube or a Quick Lube, you drive over and the mechanic is down
underneath,
like a floor beneath you in this big pit, right? And they look up, so there's oftentimes no lift. They're just below the ground surface. They're like in the basement.
Oh yeah, and so like you're drilling through your foundation and stuff to create a whole new basement.
Exactly.
Interesting. So that's expensive. Yeah.
That's expensive. So that's one example. And I can't answer the rest. I mean, I don't know why it costs that much. I mean, all I can tell you is what our cost is, and we do it all the time.
Yeah. No, that's cool.
Now,
that
doesn't include, just so you know, it's lease, like you said. It's renting, leasing. We're not talking about purchasing or owning the building or anything like that. It is an option, by the way. Some of our new franchises go, well, I want to own, so they can. But at that point, I say, well, understand, it's probably going to cost more than $400,000 then if you're going to want to buy the property. You know what I mean? Which is fine.
Yeah.
You can do that. It's an option. And we have the flexibility. It's not like we restrict or don't allow that. Of course not. But it just wouldn't fall within that investment range.
Yeah, sure. You have maybe a more savvy kind of investor guy, and he has a little more capital he's trying to deploy, and you could do a sale leaseback, right? You get a blank land, you build it up, you give yourself a good lease, and then you sell it, return all the capital, and go do it again, right? So like, there's options with this, but your average person is gonna be doing that range. Okay. All right. So can we hit the item 19?
Yep. So item 19. So our average of those 500 plus locations, average is just over $1 million in sales revenue, and the average EBITDA or owner profit is just over 17%. Okay.
Nice.
So, and that's average. And I always say, Josh, I'll be very transparent here. I always say we're not looking for average. Okay. I always say, there's a due diligence process that's going on, but it goes both ways, because at Amco, at least, we're not in the business of selling franchises. We're in the business of awarding them. So while you're going to do your due diligence on us, we're going to do ours on you, because we're looking for those with that business acumen and operational management skill set that, frankly, in our opinion, is going to be, I mean, obviously there's never a guarantee, right? But in our opinion, we're trying to bring on people who are going to be above average, because we want to grow the chain, not only in number of locations, but in sales per location as well, right? Because that's good for everybody. It's good for the new franchisee, certainly good for the franchisor, and frankly, it's good for all the existing franchisees, because as those numbers rise, as the size of the chain and the average sales per location in that chain rise, that increases the value of everybody's business, and that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
So
and let me ask you this real quick.
Yeah.
Your average franchisee has a manager, right? They're not managing the store day to day.
Average, yes. Some do, but in most cases, and we recommend and highly recommend that every franchisee has a manager to handle the day to day.
Yeah, and so I just want to point out that's another big difference, where most franchises in their item 19 are showing you, the numbers they're showing you is assuming you're the manager, right? Yeah. Whereas if you have a franchise like this, and so that's 17%, is it assuming you do have a manager, right? Like that's like a major line item is a manager, right? So, yeah, I just wanted to point that out, because again, not standard for a lot of the franchises that people look at.
So thank you for that, because I'll be honest, I wasn't even aware of that, Josh, to be honest.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Most of the franchises assume you're the manager.
Yeah, no, we prefer you're not the manager. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense.
Because again, if you're managing the day-to-day, you can't really spend the time that we want you to spend, because a little selfish here, okay? Our sincerest hope, not a requirement, and it's okay if you don't, but our sincerest hope is after a year or 2 or 3, you're going to be calling me or one of my team up and say, hey, man, I want number 2, 3, or 4, okay?
Right.
Really. I mean,
yeah.
I tell every candidate that, Josh.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I mean, it's a lot easier to manage, right, 500 franchisees with 5 locations than 2,500 franchisees, just from a franchisor perspective. And the other thing I want to ask,
I just want to make the point. It's not like we don't pressure them on that. Like, it's okay.
Sure.
We have plenty swing location owners for many years, very successful, very happy, great people, no problem. I don't want to sway anybody. But of course,
sure.
If you have I always say, if you have an appetite to grow and expand, we certainly would love to have, that you're the kind of person we'd like to have too.
Great. And then the other thing I want to ask about is, these are full-time employees, or are they like working 30 hours a week?
No, full-time.
And so that means they get benefits, or?
So it's up to the franchisee, because remember, they're all independently owned and operated. So many franchisees do. Some don't. I mean, it comes in all flavors. So it really comes down to, the individual owner. This is where we don't have requirements there, right? We have suggestions, but we don't want to be, because you're independent businessmen and women. So we say you should have, we always say, hey, keep in mind, you want to keep them if they're good. You don't want them going somewhere else. So the last thing you want is they go somewhere else because you didn't give benefits and that other place did. Right?
Yeah. And so that's another, like, a lot of franchises, you're not hiring full-time people, right? You're not giving them benefits. And so from like the perspective of like, hey, I'm somebody who wants to really provide good jobs in my community, or I'm a person who wants to retain staff, right? Like all of our employees are part-time. We don't do benefits. It's very difficult, right? Like, because they'll skip town for something a little bit better, right?
It's hard to build loyalty, I would think.
Yeah. So this is very cool from like that perspective as well. So I'm glad we hit that.
Not only that, Josh, remember, we encourage that because in some ways we view your manager or your lead tech as a potential franchisee one day.
Yeah.
Okay? Not only maybe they take over the one they worked in because that franchisee retires or something, or they go out on their own, which is okay. And, if you're a good leader, you never have a problem with one of your people, right? One of your team who wants to leave you because they want to, expand their wings and open their own business. I mean, and better themselves and their lives for them and their family. Nobody
Right.
should have a problem with that. Any good leader wouldn't, right?
Right, for sure. Okay. All right, so then this is final round here, just a couple of concerns that I hear, right? One, you don't have corporate stores, so how do you test new ideas? Right? A lot of franchisees say, "Hey, we test all of our new ideas in our corporate locations." So how do you guys test your new ideas?
We have in almost every phase of our business, we have committees, okay? And they're made up of primarily franchisees. So National Fleet Committee, we have a technical committee, we have an advertising and marketing committee. I mentioned that, right? Our NCC, et cetera. And so what we do to test new ideas or new processes or whatnot, we usually ask for volunteer franchisees. And frankly, it's usually our better ones, right? Our ones that have been around a while. They're doing well, they're doing great, and they're already bought in. They're probably part of the reason we came up with this new process in the first place. So they're usually happy to be like sort of the guinea pig, if you will. Okay.
Yeah, so you guys have been around long enough that you have mature franchisees giving ideas back to the franchisor. It goes to the committee, and then some guys volunteer to test them out.
We think it's the only way to go, quite frankly. Right.
Yeah.
We like to say this is a collaborative partnership. The last thing we ever want to be is that overbearing franchisor, do it my way or the highway kind of thing. Of course, we have processes and procedures, Josh. But for example, like we have national preferred suppliers, right? We negotiate what we believe are pretty good deals, but we don't require our franchisees to use them. We suggest you do. We think it's a good deal. We think you're crazy if you don't. Franchisees cut a pretty good deal for themselves on certain items in certain markets, and they call us up and say, "Hey, it's better for me and my business to use this supplier than the one you guys." And we say, "Okay, great."
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Yeah, I've never heard of that before. Normally it's like, this is it, and this is...
I know.
Yeah.
So that's what again, our goal is for your success, man, and give you latitude and autonomy to operate your business as you see fit. You set your shop hourly labor rate, not us. You set your parts margin markups, not us.
Mm-hmm.
We suggest, we recommend, right? And we tell you, we provide guidance on how to, figure out what works in your market. But ultimately, those decisions are yours to make as the franchisee, as the owner of your business.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, next. There are a ton of, maybe not franchises that do this, but there's a ton of local car maintenance shops, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do I know if the market's oversaturated or if it can handle an Amco coming into my market?
So we have a third-party logistics and analytics company we've been working with for decades, 4 decades, that provides us these what we call open territories. That's really coming down to how do you know what an open, viable territory is? Because it's not just anywhere, Josh. So good question. It's not like you can put an Amco anywhere. So high level, first of all, we feed them all the customer data that we have around the country, and then obviously with all the markets, and they can slice and dice it any way they want. They also look at sort of high level, and I don't want to get it, into the weeds too much in this venue, but high level things like population centers, and even more importantly, registered vehicle numbers. Okay, because there are plenty of spots around the country there. It doesn't, people say, hey, I'm looking at whatever, let's say St. John's, Kansas. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that an open territory? And the answer back will be, no, it's not. It's not because we have it. It's not viable. There's not enough people and vehicles to support a successful Amco. Obviously, there's never any guarantee, but there's obviously all kinds of data points we can run, right? So 2 big factors. It has to first have the population, registered vehicle numbers, and other data points to support the best chance for success. But at the same time, it cannot impinge upon or cannibalize an existing franchise's book of business. So people, Josh, ask me all the time, like, what's the mileage? Like, what's the territory? And it's not geographic, because think about it. In places like New York City metropolitan, we have nearly 40 locations within probably 30, 40 square miles. Okay.
Yeah.
Now you couldn't do that in Topeka, Kansas, obviously. Right?
Yeah. I mean, there's probably like 3 or 4 million people in those 30 or 40 square miles, right?
No, try 17 million.
Okay, well,
In
there you go.
Yeah. because even with the 35 locations, we have another probably a dozen open territories in the New York metropolitan area,
Oh wow, that's so crazy.
right?
Okay, yeah, yeah. So just two points I want to make on this is one is like your territories look at your actual KPIs, which is vehicles, right? And there's so many franchises that their territories are just based off of an arbitrary population number, which isn't tied to like, but they sell to businesses or they sell, like you said, automobiles or whatever. And it's like, why are you doing it off of population if I'm not selling to just anybody, right? If it's a McDonald's, maybe, right? But if it's
Right.
just, so I really like that you guys do that. And then, unless you have a little more to say about this, can you just talk about, you said there's 300 open territories. Is that everywhere or is it concentrated in certain areas? Like, where are you guys open?
So first of all, we're licensed in all 50 states. Okay, so it's virtually everywhere, every state just about. But it's not everywhere. Like for example, it's easier for me to tell you where, like off the top of my head, like Phoenix, Arizona, we're saturated between
Okay.
our current and the new that are coming in and sort of have paid the licensing fee. Remember I told you the one-time license of 39,000. They've paid that, and we're in the process of finding real estate, getting them trained, recruiting. Right, we're going to open an Amco center. So between those two things, Phoenix is. When someone asks me about Phoenix, I say we have nothing available. Okay,
Mm.
as an example, Austin, Texas would be another. But like. On the flip side, San Francisco Bay Area, yeah, Pacific Northwest, Portland, Seattle, all in between, yes. California, almost pretty much anywhere in California, LA, Sacramento, San Diego, yes, yes, and yes. Las Vegas, Denver, pretty much all the big cities. We're getting close to being saturated in Atlanta, but it's hard to answer, Josh. But believe me, by and large, there's those 300 plus are really spread out all over. And we don't, people ask us all the time, you have a focus area, and we really don't because, wherever there's a viable location, we want to open one. Why not? People say, well, what about the socioeconomic background? You didn't mention that, but let me bring it up. I answer that by this statement. Our top 3 historical Amco centers are located, okay, one in Phoenix, Arizona, Tampa, Florida, and believe it or not, Bronx, New York.
Yeah. I mean, everybody's got cars, and if you can't, it's not like, oh, this car's giving me trouble, I'm gonna go buy a new car, right? Especially if you're like lower socioeconomics, like you have to get your car replaced. So that, I mean, like, that does kind of make sense.
And by the way, the other one that's always at the top of the list is a suburb of Youngstown, Ohio. So my
Oh,
point
that's
is, we're not
interesting.
talking about like, anywhere like in LA or, you know what I mean? Like, don't get me wrong. They do great, but I'm just saying historically our most successful, like highest grossing are those 3 areas. And they're basically all walks of life, right? I
Yeah.
mean, cost of living wise and everything else, right? I mean, so that's why we don't really have a focused area, because as long as those other factors the boxes are checked, let's go. If that's where you want
Yeah.
to be, you know what I mean?
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, well, Tom, I really appreciate it. Do you have any like departing thoughts or anything that I didn't get to that you wanted to hit before we wrap up here?
I just had my notes here. No, I think we hit on it. I really appreciate your time, Josh. Thank you so much for allowing me to do this. Obviously, if you or anyone that might view has questions, you'll provide my contact information, or they'll get to me through you. Is great. I just can't tell you how excited we are. We have so many tailwinds, behind us that are really driving this growth. We both home and abroad. So again,
Yeah.
thanks for the time and the in-depth conversation you brought out. I learned some things today, so I appreciate that. And
Yeah.
I hope
Actually,
you did
you know
as
what?
well.
There's one thing that I forgot to ask, because I know people are going to ask, even though it's kind of ridiculous, right? Like EVs are in low single digits in terms of like the percentage on the ground, but like, oh well, maybe over the long run, whatever, right? You guys are already replacing EV batteries and working on hybrids and all that stuff, right?
We're already working on both. Yeah, we have been for years. You're right. Remember the 300 million registered vehicles I told you about? Well,
Yeah.
less than 4% are EVs.
Yeah.
Industry experts predict that if you combined EVs and hybrids together, it'll be at least the year 2050, probably longer, before they equal the combustible engine vehicles on the road today. And then, so we're a long way away, contrary to what, say, many politicians might have us believe. We're a long way away from that. And the best example of that is if you look at know anything about the car rental business? I do, because they're national accounts of my previous locations, because they have huge fleets. Let's take Enterprise, for example. They have nearly 1.5 million vehicles in their fleet in this country. Okay? 3 to 5 years ago, when this whole EV thing, and you heard all these politicians, oh yeah, by 2030, all EVs, no more CE, right? No more CEs. And so this rental car company started proactively transitioning their fleet from CE, combustible engine, to EV. Hertz was at the forefront of that, okay? Where they got up to a point where it was 25 or 30% of their fleet had just about been completed. That was their goal. Well, guess what happened? The adaptation isn't there, okay? They couldn't rent them. People, right? Travelers, business travelers are coming into town for a day or two. They got a meeting. The last thing they want to worry about is where's a charging station and how long do I got to charge it? They just want to get to their meetings and get back to the airport and fly home. Vacationers, similar, but for different reasons. They're doing their thing. They don't want to be worried about, so they couldn't rent them. I remember I travel a lot. They often asked me, hey, would you like an EV? And I always said no. Because that's another thing.
The last trip I went on, the cheapest option was an EV. Right. And I was like, I don't know how to, I don't know. There's got to be like certain special things about it. I don't know how to drive a Tesla. I don't know where the charging stations are. Like you said, I'm in and out in 2 days. Like, I don't want to deal with this.
Right. You just don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
So the fact is, but that was the last sort of really big technological advancement. So Amco had 3 to 5 years, or really with Teslas, it's 10 years or 100,000 miles, I think, is their warranty. But anyways, we had long runways to figure out things. One of the first thing we learned about an EV, guess what? You can't put an EV on a lift in a traditional garage and raise it in the air. The undercarriage, it'll damage it, like thousands of dollars in damage because of the way their undercarriage is. So we learned, one of the very first things we learned is they need what we call now pucks, but they're adapters that you have to put on your lifts in all of their shops around the country just to get an EV in and lift it up in the air. Okay?
Oh, wow.
So believe me, someone probably learned that the hard way, right? And they probably had to buy an EV, because you lift up a car that's not situated right on the undercarriage, it'll literally just like fold and get crushed. And like you'll total it. All right. So EVs needed these pucks. So one of the first things we did was we announced to the chain, we said everyone's got to get these pucks or you can never work on an EV because you can't get it in the air. But EVs, you're right. People say, Tom, they don't have engines. So they don't need tune-ups, oil changes, etc. And I said, you're right, they don't, but they still have cooling systems, brake systems, suspension systems, etc. There's still plenty of things to do. And, by the way, a little known fact, Josh, since you brought it up, on average, EVs are 20 to 30% heavier than their combustible engine counterparts. What does that mean? It means that, yes, what you lose in, say, oil change or tune-up revenue, you'll gain maybe even more than make up with increased number of tires and brakes that they need, because it's just physics. The heavier the equipment, the faster the rubber will wear out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So
very cool. Yeah. And then, same like you're saying, the changing of the batteries, like that can't be cheap. You guys have to source them and
not only
get rid of them.
Another really little known secret about EV batteries, they're a hazardous waste. So it's not a big problem yet, but it's going to become one, because you can't take a bad failed EV battery to a landfill. It's against the law. It's a hazardous waste. So, and hazardous waste disposal is uber expensive. Okay. So the real solution is going to be technology that's developed to remanufacture and recycle EV batteries. And I believe, and most of us in the industry believe, that'll definitely happen. The real challenge is going to be, will it be designed and developed cost effectively enough that the consumer will engage? That's going to be the real
Yeah.
challenge, because there's no way we're going to, because remember, EVs they're only 4% of the market, right? When they become 20 or 30% of the market in 10, 15, 20 years from now, when thousands and thousands of them are failing, right? Because they're now 10 and 20 years old. Where are we going to put all these batteries? Because they're about the size of a normal cocktail table in a living room. That's how big
Yeah.
they are. They're big. And then obviously they're heavy, because they're the big reason why EVs are so much heavier than their combustible engine counterparts. So it's a real challenge, and it's not talked about, of course. You don't hear politicians talking about that, because, that's counterproductive probably to the messaging. But I don't want, this is not about politics.
No,
I don't
but
want to
I
make it
appreciate
about
the insight. Yeah. No, I appreciate the insight. Everything else can be about politics. We're talking about franchising.
We're
here.
talking about franchising and Amco in particular. That's right.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, well, very good conversation, Tom. Hopefully some people heard this and their ears perked up a little bit. Definitely a play, I think, for people who want to be multi-unit owners, for people who don't want to be stuck in their business forever, and for people who want to be in, and this is, I like these markets more, right? It's not a fad, right? Where it's growing, it's historically grown. You have this 2 to 4% increase where you're going to get a little bit up every year, but it's not going to go anywhere, right? Anything that goes up really fast usually is followed by, downs too. So,
Right.
I think there's a lot of people this would be a good fit for. Reach out to me. I'll make sure that's available where you are. Maybe I can find you a couple other options to look at, right? I don't think people looking at franchising should just look at one.
Sure.
Even if they pick the first one they liked, at least they had something to bounce things off of. We'll get you going. So, Tom, again, thank you very much. Great conversation, and hopefully some of the listeners found it helpful as well.
Thank you again, Josh. Really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day.
All right, you too.
Bye-bye.
All right.